Rafa, a city in southern Gaza, have left a trail of devastation and death, exacerbating an already dire humanitarian crisis. The deafening roar of fighter jets, the terrifying whistle of falling bombs, and the heart-wrenching cries of the wounded have become all too familiar sounds for the people of Gaza, trapped in a seemingly endless cycle of violence. Homes have been reduced to rubble, burying families under mounds of concrete and twisted metal. Hospitals, already struggling to cope with the influx of casualties, are stretched to their breaking point, their corridors overflowing with the wounded and dying. The stench of death hangs heavy in the air, a grim testament to the human cost of this latest conflagration. The recent escalation of violence comes in the wake of heightened tensions between Israel and Hamas, the Islamist group that governs Gaza. Hamas, designated as a terrorist organization by Israel, the United States, and the European Union, has fired rockets into Israeli territory, prompting swift and deadly retaliation from the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF. This latest chapter in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a stark reminder of the fragility of peace in the region and the urgent need for a just and lasting solution. The international community must act decisively to prevent further bloodshed and alleviate the suffering of innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. The time for empty rhetoric and half-hearted measures is long gone. The stakes are simply too high. To understand the current crisis in Rafah, one must delve into the complex and blood-soaked history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The roots of this conflict can be traced back to the early 20th century, with competing claims to the same land and the displacement of Palestinians during the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. The Six-Day War of 1967 resulted in Israel's capture of Gaza, along with the West Bank and East Jerusalem, further fueling tensions and dispossession. The subsequent occupation of these territories, coupled with the expansion of Israeli settlements, has been a constant source of grievance and resistance among Palestinians. The establishment of the Palestinian Authority in the 1990s, following the Oslo Accords, offered a glimmer of hope for a negotiated two-state solution. However, the failure to achieve a final peace agreement, continued settlement expansion, and the outbreak of the Second Intifada in 2000 shattered these hopes. The rise of Hamas in Gaza, following their victory in the 2006 Palestinian legislative elections, further complicated the situation. Hamas's control of Gaza and their commitment to armed resistance against Israel have led to a series of devastating conflicts, each leaving behind a trail of destruction and deepening the cycle of violence. The people of Rafah, like those in Gaza as a whole, are bearing the brunt of this latest conflagration. The relentless bombardment has turned their lives upside down, forcing them to cower in fear as bombs rain down from the sky. Thousands have been displaced from their homes, seeking refuge in overcrowded UN shelters where conditions are dire. The already precarious humanitarian situation in Gaza has been pushed to the brink of collapse. Hospitals, lacking essential supplies and overwhelmed with casualties, are struggling to provide even basic medical care. The constant power outages have crippled critical infrastructure, further compounding the misery of the civilian population. Children, the most vulnerable victims of war, bear deep psychological scars from the trauma they have endured. The deafening explosions, the loss of loved ones, and the constant fear have left an indelible mark on their young minds. The long-term consequences of this trauma on their physical and mental well-being are immeasurable. The international community cannot stand idly by as an entire population is held hostage to this cycle of violence. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza demands immediate and sustained attention. The provision of essential supplies, medical aid, and psychological support is not a matter of charity, but a moral imperative. The latest violence in Rafah has drawn widespread international condemnation, with world leaders and human rights organizations expressing grave concern over the escalating situation. The United Nations Security Council has called for an immediate ceasefire and urged all parties to exercise restraint. The European Union has condemned the violence and called for an end to the bloodshed, emphasizing the need for a negotiated two-state solution. However, concrete action from the international community has been limited, with the United States, Israel's closest ally, often blocking meaningful resolutions at the UN Security Council. The lack of a unified international response has emboldened both sides, perpetuating the cycle of violence. The absence of accountability for alleged war crimes and human rights violations has further fueled the conflict, creating a climate of impunity. The international community must move beyond mere condemnation and take concrete steps to hold all parties accountable for their actions. This includes investigating alleged war crimes, imposing targeted sanctions on those responsible for human rights violations, and demanding